Many people wonder what is the most important thing that replenishes youth. Maybe it's sincere enthusiasm and desire for a bright future. For some, the most important aspect may be strong friendship for many years. Or young hearts still require something more. For example, a relationship. But for the main character, all these things are illusory, and all this is not enough. There are many incomprehensible situations between people. In other words, it is very difficult to find a person who could understand you. But the young man thinks that if the desire to understand each other is ignored, then calling love that way loses its meaning. Busy with these thoughts, Chris Brown finds on his desk an invitation from one of his students to the tennis court. For him, it's a complete headache to receive confessions from his charges. To his surprise, when he arrived at the meeting place, he saw his familiar student named Melinda Spring. Chris decided to write off this meeting as some work moment and immediately began talking about the report that she could submit to the student council. But the girl was not happy about this. She wants him to stop pretending to be stupid. Melinda will kill him if he does not listen to her. Chris decides to ignore everything and has already turned around to walk away. The heroine ran out of patience. She grabbed the young man by the collar and pulled him towards her. Finding himself in a difficult situation, Chris looks at Melinda, flushed with embarrassment. She, gathering her courage, confesses her love to him. The student wants to know whether he will accept her feelings and whether he will become her boyfriend. Chris feels trapped for the first time. This is a real recognition that he cannot avoid. But he does not want to fall in love yet, and it will be difficult to refuse. She is the champion of the archery club. Melinda continues to shake him by the shoulders and ask the fatal question. Chris just wants to fall into the ground and disappear. But he realizes that he is a strong man who has had to go through many battles. He is the best when it comes to escaping. Chris decides to play the role and turns around and looks Melinda straight in the eyes. Saying that, unfortunately, he already has a loved one. But to his surprise, he said this not alone. The guys notice a student standing in the distance who apologizes and says that she is very sorry. It turns out that Melinda had appointed a rather popular meeting place because a few meters away, there was also an unsuccessful declaration of love. Having heard the same words from a girl standing nearby, Melinda does not believe her lover's excuse. She demands that he tell her the truth and not fuss with banal excuses. Chris inhales, he apologizes to Melinda, and admits that he actually has feelings for one person. Slamming her hand on the bench, the girl does not give up. She wants to know who this man is, and if Chris does not tell her, Melinda will confess to him every day and will do this wherever possible. Seeing the serious mood, the hero does not understand where to retreat and decides that there is only one way out. He decides that it would be better to lie, and in an impulse, he shouts out that this person is Ninel Klaus. Hearing this, Melinda relaxed, saying that if it is Ninel, then everything is fine. She doesn't think that this girl knows Chris. In her opinion, the two of them cannot have any relationship. Besides, his chosen one is going to leave the school next year. Smiling sweetly, Melinda says that even if he doesn't like her now, she will definitely try to please him in the future. Running away, she joyfully shouts that she will come for the young man tomorrow morning. Chris does not understand what just happened. Sitting in his office in the evening, he doesn't understand why it didn't work out for him. It was an ideal refusal. Chris is almost sure that youth is also a problem. At the same time, the student council president, Tana Sinclair, enters the office. Seeing that the vice president is still there, she decides to sit on his desk and find out what he is doing here at such a time. He shudders and blurts out that he stayed to help with student council affairs. Although in his head, he asks himself if she herself doesn't know who left him working here late. Tana decides to tell him what a good person he is and hands him a cup of coffee as a reward for working overtime. The hero shrugs it off. He doesn't need it. His mother said that drinking coffee at night is harmful. Putting on an innocent face, she can't believe she was so kind, and apparently no one appreciates it. These words are like an arrow piercing the vice president's head. He understands that this is a sly fox. Taking a mug of coffee and bowing his head, he promises that he will definitely remember the president's kindness. Tana is happy to hear the vice president say something about kindness. She is sure that he will reciprocate her feelings. During her speeches, Chris again saw another love letter on the table. Noticing the young man's curious gaze, Tana wants to know what her colleague thinks about love letters. These words take Chris by surprise. How can the president know that Melinda wrote him a love letter? Or maybe the love letter was written by Tana, and she has now decided to come and remind him. The girl sees that the vice president is not answering her question for a long time and decides to ask it again. Such protrusions are too unfair to the young teenager. But at that moment, their intimate atmosphere is interrupted by a knock on the door and the question of whether the president is here. But she's not at all interested in that right now. And without hearing an answer, the girl decides that Chris wants her to hug him even tighter. Twirling the button on Chris's blouse, she talks about how petty the vice president is. She squeezes him even tighter in her arms. Chris says that he can no longer breathe. The employee nevertheless decides to open the door and finds the guys doing a very interesting activity. Out of awkwardness, he slams the door and runs away, while Chris tries to shout after him that he got it all wrong. Pulling away from the vice president, Tana breaks into a satisfied smile, saying that the problem is solved. She decides to explain herself. Who, if not the vice president who receives many love letters, will be able to understand her? This information, of course, clarifies a lot for Chris, but she clearly did not think about his personal safety. Sipping her already cooled coffee, she wants to offer the young man her scent in return. Chris is already ready to defend himself from this fox. He wants to know what she is going to do. Tana grabs his hands and wants to know why he is looking at her like that. Is she really a sinner in his eyes? The girl takes her palms and brings them to his face so that they cover his eyes and asks him not to peek. And he says that if he dares to peek, it could cause a real bloody storm. Frightened, the main character even decides to turn away. While behind him, the girl pulled her hair into a ponytail and began to take off her shirt. Next, Tana unzips her skirt, and Chris hears something light fall to the floor. He doesn't understand what the president was up to there, what that strange noise he heard was. The last step was to change his shoes. Tana playfully asks if he knows what that noise was. The vice president is already beginning to lose his temper, and at this moment, a woman's hand is once again dragging him by the collar of his shirt. She turned him around on the chair and said that now he can open his eyes. Tana shows off in front of Chris and wants to know what he thinks, whether the dress suits her. Seeing this whole spectacle, the young man replies that she looks beautiful, but he wonders why she is changing clothes in the office again, because someone might see her. The president walks away and starts laughing. She apologizes and explains that she's in a hurry. She's having a dinner party at home today, so she doesn't know what to do. But to note, she did not change clothes in the office. This dress can be folded so that it fits into a school uniform. So she just takes off her uniform, and as she does so, she starts demonstrating how she did it, and Chris starts waving his hands and asking her to stop and not continue explaining. In order not to seem rude, the young man says that she mentioned a dinner party and for some reason is in no hurry to attend. But then Tana remembers the torn button on the vice president's shirt. She sits down on her knees and puts her hands on Chris's neck, saying that he is very careless as a member of the student council. It is wrong to leave his discipline and button exposed like this. The girl carefully secures the tie with her hairpin until the hero does not understand when his button managed to come off. Having finished, Tana prepares to leave and says in parting that this was an additional reward for the vice president for voluntarily agreeing to work overtime. After all this experience, the poor student simply cannot overcome his excitement and holds on to his tie. Walking along the corridor, Tana believes that this evening has already been a success, that she finally got it. Left in the office, Chris wonders who the second letter is from, if the president has nothing to do with it. In this letter, the girl invited him to a nearby cafe after school and even left a signature, Ninel K. Seeing this, the young man wondered if the queen of their school had really written to him. If you believe today's horoscope, then maybe another recognition awaits him. Already sitting in a cafe, Chris decides to break the awkward silence and find out whether Miss Ninel was looking for him. Leafing through the book, she mysteriously says that Melinda came to her today. But now this is not the most important thing for her. The most important thing is that Chris likes her. And then Melinda explained to her in detail his shortcomings and the reasons why she and he could not be together. From such words, Chris even choked on his tea. Ninel wants to know if everything is okay with him. The young man clears his throat and, saying that he is completely fine, tries to explain that this is not what she thinks about. The girl suggests that he simply used her as an excuse to refuse Melinda. Chris bows to her, and he is incredibly happy. The young man thanks her for her understanding. He leans even lower and apologizes for using what he likes as an excuse. Closing the book, Ninel looks at him and asks if he will be her boyfriend. Chris doesn't understand that he's in the Matrix and wants to know if the girl is joking with him. But she is quite serious. But she means for him to pretend to be her boyfriend. This will be beneficial for both of them, since Melinda, even after hearing his refusal, did not give up if they pretend. then this is a way to make other people give up. But Chris is afraid that this may drive other people. But Ninel, sighing, says that her situation is much more complicated than his. She is about to leave and says goodbye, that this is just a proposal, and asks not to worry about it so much, but just think about it. The girl promises to meet him here tomorrow, and she will wait for an answer from him. The next morning, lying in bed, Chris, through his sleep, hears the ringing of an alarm clock and someone's steps approaching him. The girl carefully climbs onto his bed and approaches the protagonist's face. Feeling something pressing on his chest, Chris finally decides to open his eyes and sees his sister in a cat costume in front of him. The young man jumps up in surprise and asks why she's dressed like that again and what she needs again. The girl turns out to be unhappy because last night she went to bed without a bath and now she smells bad. Chris apologizes for causing such inconvenience to his little sister. She approaches him and, smiling, says that everything is fine and compliments that he smells very tasty. Grabbing her by the jacket, he drags her along and says that he won't bother with her, and now he's going to brush his teeth. While the brother is brushing his teeth, the sister is hanging on him, and the hero wonders how long she's going to hang like that. She starts whining about how her brother doesn't even want to give her time to warm up. Her brother starts screaming that she shouldn't say such misleading words. Their screams could be heard even on the street. But instead of the morning squabbles, the little sister decides to thank her brother and prepares him breakfast with love. Chris tries the scrambled eggs, and the girl says she's sure they turned out amazing today. As he finishes his next bite, he decides to ask how often people confess to his sister at school. This question shocks the girl. She says that this really happens. Chris grabs her hand and asks her to tell her how she usually responds to fans, and what to do if the other person does not give up even after rejection. Blushing a little, she always answers that she has a boyfriend, and if they don't believe her, then she shows a photo of her brother. She frees her hand and wants them to hurry up since they are already late for school. And Chris thought, perhaps what Ninel suggested was the only effective way. At the same time, Melinda is waiting for her lover and thinks why he has not come yet. But suddenly the door opens and Chris appears from behind it. Seeing the girl, he is surprised that she really came. Seeing her in archery club clothes, he decides to run away, as he was afraid that she had come by force to settle the matter with the rejected confession. Watching his betrothed move further and further, the girl catches up with him and lays him on the floor. At this moment, Chris thinks at what point his life began to turn into a romantic comedy. Melinda drags him along, and the young man wants to know why she is leading him along, and how the girl turned out to be planning to arrange a date for them. But suddenly in the distance, they notice a strange company of people. In the center of this meeting is a fair-haired youth. Seeing Melinda, he smiles and starts waving. But it seems that the student doesn't really like it, and her face immediately changes, and Chris wants to know who this guy is. Melinda turns sharply back, and with exclamations of admiration, addresses the hero as if he were her dear one. She grabs his hand and thanks him for seeing her off, and asks him because of the intense heat to wait backstage. Chris asks why she changed so suddenly. He even felt uneasy. In a whisper, the girl begins to threaten the young man. If he does not play along with her, the shooting club will take him and use him hostage as a target for training. Running away, she asks to look after her purse while she gets ready. Chris can only agree to her threats and requests. A fair-haired young man watched all this, and looking at all this, decides to say goodbye to his fans. He approached Chris and asked if he was the deputy chairman of the Sequel Polytechnic. The young man extends his hand to him and introduces himself by the name Ashton Ram. He had already heard about Chris from Melinda and did not think that they could collide. He notices that while the young man was seeing the girl off, she caused him a lot of trouble. But since he was the one who invited Melinda, after the meeting he himself takes her back so that Chris does not bother himself. The main character thinks this is all one big manipulation, but Ashton continues to send him away, saying that if he is not interested in watching the performance, he can come back, and he himself will then explain everything to Melinda. Chris waves his hands away, moving away a little, says that he received an invitation from the student union. And as for who will accompany Miss Spring, it has nothing to do with him. And accordingly, Ashton too, he coldly says goodbye to his new acquaintance. This amuses Mr. Ram, and most importantly, he has nothing to worry about. Watching this exchange, Melinda breaks into a smile. The performance continues. The girl is doing a good job of hitting the target accurately. But Chris, sitting in the hall, is just waiting for this performance to end. Due to his half-asleep state, Melinda's bag falls out of his hands and Having opened, all its contents end up on the floor. The young man's eyes widen, and collecting books, he discovers that in fact the girl has a bunch of books with her about methods of courting guys. While collecting accessories from the floor, he hears someone outside discussing the girl's appearance, saying that she takes advantage of her beauty and thinks that she is always right. Looking outside, Chris sees Ashton listening to a girl who offers to teach a lesson to one self-confident girl. Fans are getting closer and closer to their idol and say that the slap he received is not a trifle at all. Ashton dissuades them. He doesn't want them to look for problems on their own because of him, but the girls continue to insist that the scoundrel needs to understand that this cannot be done. Unnoticed, Melinda approaches Chris and she wants to know what he is doing here. The young man wants to know if she will believe him if he tells her gossip. By this time, the girl has already thought that he is spying on other girls. But Chris replies that he has already seen so much of them today that his eyes are already calloused. Melinda quickly sits him down in a chair. She is glad of his revelation. After all, then he will look only at her. She wants to know if he understood her, to which the hero agrees. Melinda falls next to him on the bench and says that she took into account how peacefully he behaved today and played along with her. And now she is ready to reward him so that he can help a beautiful girl put on her socks. If he puts her socks on, he can go home. Having said this, the girl throws one leg over his thigh, but there is no joyful smile on Chris's face. Seeing this, Melinda removes her foot and is indignant because her feet are clean, and besides, he didn't even ask why he was being rewarded. The hero clears his throat and tries to explain to her that apparently she misunderstood everything. He was about to say that he didn't even like this. But when he saw the drawn arrow in front of his face, he abruptly changed his answer to a more positive one. The young man obediently takes out his old socks from his bag and solemnly puts them on Melinda. Sitting down next to him, he says that putting socks on a beautiful girl is actually a great honor for him. Miss Spring is glad that he understands this. She leans a little on his shoulder and says that today she really wants to thank him for seeing her off. Chris wants to know if he and Ashton Ram really know each other so well. Hearing this, the girl even jumped up from her seat, wondering if her lover was jealous of her. She says that yesterday she met Ashton, a member of the shooting club from another school. She never really talked to him, but he asked her why she was still here at such a late time. And yesterday, when the performance was announced, he began to pester her. He was convinced that she stayed late to wait for him. That's why she slapped him. She doesn't know what he said to others. But today at the performance, many were unhappy with her presence. Chris understands what is happening. People are discussing all this behind her back. He wants to tell her something else. But to his surprise, he notices that the girl has fallen asleep peacefully on his shoulder. He takes her face in his hands and, moving it closer to him, tries to understand whether she is pretending to be asleep or not. Thinking that she really fell asleep, he lowers her head onto the briefcase and is about to leave. But when he hears a familiar female voice behind him shouting his name, he stops and Melinda rushes towards him. The girl is angry. In her opinion, Chris understands absolutely nothing about girls' hearts. If he noticed that the girl was sleeping soundly, shouldn't she be picked up and carried home? The young man smiles awkwardly and wants to know what this story is from some women's magazine. Melinda freezes in silent shock. Is it really her chosen one who has those magazines? After calling Chris a fool, she turns around and says that she will go home to change clothes. And she tells him to return to school alone. But for the hero, this is not a problem at all. Walking on the way back, the young man thinks, despite the fact that Ashton deceived those girls, he feels ashamed of him. For some reason, he himself must, at all costs, prevent the plans of those three against Melinda. But for some reason, he was haunted by the feeling that something was wrong. When they met, he behaved in such a way that Chris would leave as soon as possible, most likely to give free rein to his fans. Meanwhile, the girls had already met, and the leader asked Melinda if she knew what was happening. The girl didn't even have time to really say anything before a slap landed in her face. The opponent says that this blow was for the head of Ashton. Rubbing her red cheek, the girl replies that trash usually likes to gather in a pile. The rival grabs her by the shirt and starts shaking her, asking who else is trash here. Melinda says that of course she means them, and this Ashton, they are all a bunch of dirt. The girl again swings at the impudent woman and shouts for her to shut her mouth. But the blow did not happen because out of nowhere, Chris appeared behind her and grabbed her hand. He looks at the girls and wants to know if they really like being controlled. The girl gets out of his grip and also slaps him in the face, shouting that she and Ashton are connected by love, and he should not care about that. Chris looks at her with contempt and coldness, while Melinda wants to know if he is okay. She runs and takes his hand, saying that he is not to blame for anything, but he should leave. After listening to Melinda, he picks her up in his arms and invites them to leave here together. The student presses herself to his chest and, shedding tears, quietly agrees with him. The rival stands in bewilderment and shouts that they cannot leave so easily. But what about retribution? Chris sighs and aloud asks Ashton to come out already. Everything is bad enough, but if he finds him himself, it will be even worse. The enemy comes out and says that he did not expect this from the vice president, and immediately tries to shield himself. Allegedly, not he started all this, but was simply passing by. The main character puts Melinda on the ground and hits his opponent in the face with all his might. Ashton flies away a decent distance, and sitting rubbing his cheek, he hears that Chris returned the slap to him. And he also wants the young man to think before he does something, and warns that he has a recording from the cameras of the sports complex where he can be seen pestering Melinda. Ashton bows down before them like a puppy. He promises that there won't be a next time, while his fans are perplexed. Amid cries about what a loser he is and undeserving of their love, Melinda and Chris leave. The guys decided to take a break, and Miss Spring brings her savior an ice-cold cola to apply to the site of the blow. She also wants to know how he found out what the girls and Ashton were planning. Chris claims that he initially turned them against her by making them look pitiful. And then he wanted to pretend to be a hero who saved the beauty. This is a typical story from a manhwa. Melinda notes that her hero is smart enough to choose a different scenario. The girl announces that now if he is her hero, he must be responsible for her, and he is the one she will follow. Already at home while washing the dishes, he receives an angry message from Miss Spring, asking why he ran away after dinner. Chris is uncomfortable with this situation, but if he had not escaped, he would have died there on the spot. His little sister quietly approaches him and asks why her brother is chatting with a bad girl. The young man immediately begins to deny it and says that it was a message with an advertisement from the store, but her sister doubts her tone. And she really wants to see for herself whether he's telling her the truth, so she's trying to take his phone away. In the end, she was still able to pin him to the ground and ordered him to remain silent while she checked. The sister tries to unlock the phone and discovers that the password is not her birthday. Her brother is actually a fool and needs to be taught a lesson. She gets up from Chris and, spinning around, says that she believes and this is really an advertisement from the store. But for now, she wants to keep his phone and deliberately tries to put it in her chest so that her brother definitely does not dare to take it away. And apparently, she slightly overestimated the size of her charms because the phone simply fell back to the floor. Seeing how upset his little sister is because of this embarrassment, he invites her to do something else that she wants. The girl turns around in surprise and decides to ask him again, to which she again receives approval to do whatever she wants. Only when he was already lying on her lap did he understand what kind of incomprehensible anxiety was in his heart. Chris decides to clarify whether they are definitely brother and sister. Otherwise, how can she explain her rather strange hobby? Laying his head on the side, she reminds him that he himself allowed her to do what she wants. After all, when she helps clean others' ears, she experiences a lot of emotions. How could such a relaxing hobby be strange, the way he talks about it? Although Chris thinks it's strange, he also gets some pleasure from the dripping in his ears. He even closes his eyes. But when he opens them, he sees how the towel the sister was wearing almost no longer covers her body. He jumps up sharply. The food girl manages to pull the stick out of his ear. The little sister is clearly not happy with his attack. Chris explains that he just wanted to turn his back because he was going to send a message to one bad girl. And if his sister saw this, she would be very angry. But she doesn't seem to care, and she just pulls him by the cheek and says that he can be on the phone. But why is he laughing at her? He receives messages from girls, but he is already tired of them and asks his sister Molly for permission not to go to school tomorrow. But she just leans towards his ear and asks in a whisper if he forgot that tomorrow is Saturday. And her tone suddenly changes to stern, because it turns out that he forgot that tomorrow he must go watch her performance. Chris immediately begins to make excuses that he remembers about the city dance competitions, and he will definitely come to them. Although he forgot that tomorrow is Saturday, he felt that tomorrow there would be something important, so he was looking for an excuse not to go to campus. Molly looks at him with an all-consuming gaze and wants to know whether his brother really promises to come, and the young man solemnly swears to her. She gets up and goes to bed, saying that they will see each other tomorrow evening at the theater. At the same time, the chairman writes to him, and she intends to meet with the vice president tomorrow morning, which Chris is not happy about. If Molly sees that the chairman will come to him in the morning, then he will not live. Already in the morning, his sister writes to him that she is already at the theater and is going to the dress rehearsal. This is not without reason. Chris sent Molly to the theater in advance and also hurried to the library to avoid danger and saved himself from his sister's terrible wrath. Behind him, he hears the voice of the chairman. She hands him a mug and offers him coffee, which the young man is incredibly happy about. But suddenly he stops and realizes that there is some familiar sensation on his shoulder. The chairman's breasts have managed to rest on him, and she smiles and says good morning to Chris as he tries to come to his senses again. While eating still hot buns, the hero wants to know how Tana found out that he was hiding in the library. She also takes a bite of bread and asks if he knows why the hare falls into a trap so easily. The young man tries to hide from her malicious gaze and wants to know the answer to the question that she asked. Tana puts her hand on his arm and laughingly explains that the reason is that he is a coward. As soon as the hunter makes the slightest sound, the hare will immediately run in fear in the other direction. And at the same time, a smart hunter only needs to know the habits of a hare in order to set a trap. And then the hare falls into her of his own free will. Tana runs her finger over his lips and asks if her judgment is correct, and at the same time calls him a bunny. Now Chris fully understands where she's going with this allegory about hares, and he decides to ask why she, with such intelligence, has not yet found herself a boyfriend. Tana smiles playfully and says that if she really falls in love, then no one can escape her. Chris doesn't understand where this fox learned such things, why she smiles when she tells him all this. But the question still remains open. The young man wants to know why she was looking for him. The answer turns out to be much simpler than he thought. She wanted to see him and possibly go on a blind date with him. Chris understands that he urgently needs to get out of here, and getting up says that he is not feeling well today, so now they will have to say goodbye. The fox, as always, is not so simple, and placing a footrest under the table knocks the young man off his feet. She manages to grab his hand and, pulling him towards her, puts it on her chest while looking a little confused and asking the question if he wanted to grab her hand. And does he really want her to scream at the top of her voice right here, right now? Sitting down at the table again, Chris thinks only about one thing, no matter how he screams now. He already feels as if she is a hunter, and he is really the same bunny whom she pulls by the ears. In the end, he has to apologize to her and tell her that he already feels much better. This news makes Tanu happy, and she says that he just needs to meet one person, and that's all. He shouldn't be so nervous. Chris decides to tell her that she has no idea how many guys at school wanted to skin him when she used him as an excuse, and he is not going to face certain death. Tana understands that you have to pay for everything, and demonstrates something that makes the hero's eyes light up with excitement. The one who goes to meet her today will receive this thing. Chris can't control himself because the reward is the game signifier for re-release. The game isn't officially due out for another 3 months, and he wants to know where she got it from. The chairman breaks into a wicked smile again because she knew that Chris loved this game. The young man bows to her and says that he will definitely go with her. These words cannot but please the girl. Walking down the street, Chris wants her to tell him about this terrible man, because the main character needs to know what to prepare for. Tana says that his family returned from abroad, is on the list of the best entrepreneurs in the world, does business with her family, and at the last banquet their parents drank too much and said that they were already at the age to get to know him better. This has already happened, but now she definitely has to refuse. Chris is wondering why not take a closer look at the young man. But this will not happen. Tana again embraces the hero, talking about how interesting Chris is and that she has not played enough with him yet. The vice president now looks more like a tomato and awkwardly says that he doesn't understand why the chairman always says such strange things. Suddenly, the guys hear someone calling out to Tanu, saying that he did not expect such a meeting. This person turned out to be Nanelle. Chris immediately wanted to know what she was doing here. Luckily for them, she was just passing by and remembered the discount coupons that she wanted to give to Chris, and also reminded them to be sure to look at their expiration date. Nanelle turns around and bids them farewell, saying that she doesn't want to distract the two of them from their date. The young man is ready to grab his heart, because the coffee coupon is a sign that she is still working, waiting for his answer this evening. And besides, his sister has a competition after lunch. He frantically checks the time on his watch and says out loud that he didn't expect that the man hiding in the shadows would have such a good relationship with everyone's desired beauty. He looks at Tanya for a couple of seconds and resolutely grabs her hand and drags her forward, saying that they are going on a blind date right now. Arriving at the meeting place, they see a young man who recognizes Tanu and wants to understand who came with her. But the girl can't even catch her breath to explain everything. Since Chris ran too fast, she could barely keep up with him. But she gathers her strength and introduces him as the deputy of the student council. They accidentally met on the street and decided to eat for free. Tana wants to know if Chandler minds. On the outside, the imperturbable young man says that Tana's friends are his friends, and of course, he does not mind and even offers to sit down. But anger is boiling inside him. He does not understand how this freeloader dares to hold Tana's hand. Adjusting the ties on her sandals, the girl thinks about what a fool the deputy really is. It's obvious that he went with her to hide behind her as a shield. And now, to her surprise, he doesn't even mind talking to his rival. She decides to interrupt their conversation and suggests that Chris should have a little snack. After all, after lunch, they will have many other important things to do. A vein on Chandler's forehead begins to bulge, seeing how close the guys are sitting, and the impudent guy even knows that this is his date. He decides to take the initiative and invites Chris to have a little drink and chat, since he doesn't know him very well yet. Chandler, talking to his interlocutor about what delicious dessert wine this restaurant has, discreetly slips his wallet into his jacket. The vice president is embarrassed because he doesn't really know how to drink, and the enemy insists that he'll just try it and nothing bad will happen. At the same second, Tana, on the contrary, imagines how she tastes a glass of this delicious wine and pretends to be drunk. She will be able to do a lot, and even to spite this arrogant Chandler. Tana immediately supports the idea because good wine cannot be missed. Chris doesn't even believe that they will really drink it. Drinks are brought to them, and they solemnly raise their glasses to clink glasses. Tana decides that she will drink a little and then pretend to be drunk. But then she notices an interesting picture. Chris is already lying on the table, all flushed and holding a glass in his hand, his little finger sticking out. Has he really already gotten drunk? Chandler says that it's all his fault. Why did he offer to drink and promises to go and pay the bill and then send Chris home, and he and Tana can retire somewhere else? But the girl is already hugging the limp young man and asks Chandler not to talk like that. She was not in the mood to communicate with him before. The young man goes to pay the bill, and Chris presses himself even closer to Tanya, telling her how delicious she smells. This even begins to confuse the girl, and the hero wants to know if she can get up on her own. Since he seems unable to do this, Tana helps him get up. Suddenly, Chandler's wallet falls out of Chris's pocket, just at a convenient moment when the young man shouts to the whole audience if they have seen his wallet, he cannot find it. Chandler walks back to the table and picks up his wallet, saying that he was wondering why he couldn't find his item. But it turned out that Chris Brown secretly stole it. Continuing to lecture, he mentions that theft is a crime and they must obey the laws together. The main character still doesn't understand what's going on and offers to pay himself if his wallet was stolen. But Chandler doesn't need this. Since his opponent continues to make a fool of himself, then he'll just call the police and let them deal with him. Tanya does not like such conversations, and she asks him to stop. And if he continues the performance, then she will commit a real crime. The young man smiles and says that she herself saw how his wallet fell out of Chris's jacket. It seems to him that this kind of guy is not suitable for her. He didn't have time to finish what he wanted because splashes of red wine were already flying into his face. Tana asks him if he has come to his senses and finished his performance. Defiantly putting her foot on the table, she wants to know who he thinks he is. She doesn't care about his dirty tricks and words towards her family, as long as he doesn't interfere in her life. Tana points the finger at Chris and warns that if Chandler ruins his future, she won't stand for it. It's good that she saw through it earlier. Otherwise, tomorrow there would be one more concrete pillar under the bridge. Feeling drops of wine running down his forehead and clenching his teeth in anger, Chandler says that he understood her. Tana gently hugs Chris and asks him to ask, because all this happened through her fault. After leaving this seedy place, they decide to take a breather on a park bench. Chris gradually begins to come to his senses, opening his eyes from sleep. He wants to know what time it is. Upon learning that it is already 4 o'clock, he rises sharply and realizes with horror that he is late for his sister's performance. But to his happiness, Tana admits that she deceived him. She even laughs at the fact that she now understands how Chandler could set him up so easily. Chris doesn't quite understand what exactly happened, but the girl gives him advice to under no circumstances trust those who wear masks and smile, including her. Having relaxed a little, the young man, still a little drunk, thanks Tanu. The chairman says that in this case, as gratitude, he should give himself up. These words seem to make Chris sober up, and he says that he urgently needs to run to his sister's performance. But Tana catches up with him, and again taking his arm, says that so be it, and offers to go by subway. The hero tries to get out of it by saying that he only has one invitation card. But the chairman wouldn't be herself if she wasn't ready for anything. She pulls out 2 whole VIP tickets. Chris wants to know where she got them from. As it turns out, she needs the tickets for their next common goal, and her father gave them to her. She once again wants to make sure that they will definitely go together, and since she left no room for retreat, Chris agrees with her. Walking along the alley, the young man wants to know whether it is necessary to hold him by the waist, to which the fox reminds him that he is still drunk. After some time on their way, Tana asks him to stop as her feet are tired from the heels. Without hesitation, she directly takes off her sandals and, finding herself barefoot, says that it will be much easier for her. Noticing Chris's surprised look, she decides to playfully ask where he is looking and whether her deputy has secret hobbies. Sitting in the theater hall, Tana sadly realizes that she wanted to find out about the vice president's secret hobbies, but did not expect that he would be so worried about her bare feet that he would give her his shoes. She notices that the young man is sitting darker than a cloud, and his whole body is tense due to tension. The girl pokes him on the cheek and advises him not to be nervous, because it's his sister on stage, not him. But he suddenly gets up and points to the stage, shouting his sister's name. My brother noticed how during the dance the lacing on her dress began to come apart and was already exposing part of her body. Molly is immediately lost and simply stops dancing out of shame. No one understands how this could happen. Sitting in the dressing room, Molly hears another dance team being announced as the winner. Finally, her brother was able to get to her. Running into the room, he asks from the threshold if she is okay. Little sister throws herself into his arms while he asks why she's sitting here alone. The tearful girl admits that all her efforts went down the drain. Tana also sneaks into the dressing room and begins to pat Molly on the head, saying that she was on top, and all the questions are only about the costume. She also decided to mention that the deputy is now very worried. The little sister quickly steps aside with her brother, asking what this cunning fox forgot here. A verbal skirmish ensues between the girls. Molly immediately begins to be jealous. Chris, watching this, regrets that he could not immediately foresee their meeting. The sister grabs his hand and, pulling him along, says that it is time for them to return home. After all, next to them there is one bad and cunning lady, ready to eat him without a trace. But Tana does not intend to give up so easily. She asks her little sister to cool down. Since she treats Chris very well, the deputy finds himself between 2 fires. She wants him to confirm that he treats her well and begins to press his hand more tightly to her chest. Already pouring out a cold sweat, the young man says that the chairman is really kind to him, and in general, why don't they just live in peace and not quarrel? Molly ignores his words, as her gaze is riveted on how the sly fox is holding her brother's hand. Unable to bear it, she stands between them and pushes them in different directions, shouting that they shouldn't be so close. Crossing her arms over her chest, Molly declares that only she can do this to her brother. At the same time, a joyful girl runs into the dressing room and, seeing Molly, shouts that she has finally found her. She picks up the artist in her arms and says how great it is that they took 4th place, but next year they will try harder. The girl does not understand what is happening and what is good in 4th place. Noticing that Molly is not alone, the girl greets everyone else. When she sees Chris, she says that his sister always talks about him, without even paying attention to others. Tana suggests that this even has a name. The older brother complex. The girl confirms that this is definitely about her friend. Molly yells at Terry to stop talking nonsense and they leave as they need to change in the locker room. While they leave, Tana decides to tell Chris that it was the girl who was in charge of the props for this performance. The vixen wants to know if the vice president understands why his little sister failed. Molly warns her brother to wait for her while she changes. Tana's words do not leave Chris alone because they sounded quite reasonable. She is sure that Terry ruined the costume. Since being a member of the team, she was not annoyed by the loss. But on the contrary, she was very happy. It's not a sin to suspect something was wrong. But he needs to find out the motive for her concession himself. His head is tormented by questions, and Terry, noticing the depressed state of the young man, wants to know if he is upset by Molly's performance. He turns and agrees with her because his sister worked tirelessly for 6 months and in the end took fourth place. Sitting down next to him, the hero, as if by chance, decides to ask whether Terry checked his sister's costume well. This takes the girl by surprise. Stuttering, she begins to say that the dance costumes went through a very thorough check. She doesn't know how this could happen. Maybe the bright light on the stage was so hot that the threads began to melt. Chris realizes that something is really wrong here, and at that time he receives a call from Melinda. Having reached her, the girl wonders if he has died yet and why he does not answer her messages. The hero reports that he is now in the theater. This immediately causes a negative reaction in Melinda. She has already managed to imagine that he went there with another girl. During the call, Chris has one idea, and he decides to act immediately. He says so that Terry can definitely hear that there are CCTV cameras behind the scenes. Then he begins to act out as if they are telling him that they have a recording, and they were hit by a junior high school student. Melinda does not understand at all what Chris is talking about. She wants to know whether the young man is in his right mind. But he does not stop, but continues to play the role, telling them to wait for him and he will be there soon, and orders to call the police if necessary. Terry can't stand it and screams for him to stop, and for sure even grabs his sleeve. Crying, she admits that she set up her friend, and this failure is her doing. Melinda, having listened to this entire monologue, already thinks that the police are using this code word, and Chris Brown may have been kidnapped. Getting out of the bath, she rejoices that it is finally her turn to save the beauty. However, if she acts alone, she herself may fall into the same trap. Chris finally finds out Terry's true motive. It turns out that Molly swore that she would quit dancing if she took the prize. And in order for her to continue dancing, the costume designer decided to ruin her tutu. The girl confirms this. She asks Chris to ask her because she just wanted his sister to continue dancing. The main character begins to have a headache from all this information. Terry swoops in and wants to know if he wants Molly to believe in her dream and keep dancing. The girl begins to scream about how much she adores his sister and her determination, so she is ready to do everything to support her. And in the midst of her fiery speech, she reveals that Molly decided to quit dancing because of him. Because the brother who does his best, the brother who tries hard, no matter what he is, the sister always follows him. And in order to keep up with her brother and care for him more, Molly decided to quit dancing. Her heart belongs to her brother. Even when she rejected Terry, she showed her a photo of Chris as the reason for the rejection. This conversation left a heavy aftertaste on the soul of the main character. Before leaving, the girl asked him if Molly quit dancing, would he be able to remain calm? Returning home, he carries her on his back and invites her to take a nap if she wants, but the girl refuses, because if she falls asleep, she will not be able to hold the umbrella, and then her brother will get wet. Chris decides to ask if she really decided to quit dancing and if she will regret her decision in her old age. Molly is surprised how he could know about this, because she didn't tell him anything like that, but he rats Terry out, who told him everything. The sister blushes and says that this is not true. Until she surpasses that girl and becomes the pride of her brother, she will not give up. Now Chris's thoughts are analyzing who the girl is that his sister is competing with. Time never changes anything. It only silently watches us from the side. 2 years have passed and Chris is no longer worried about her leaving, but those emotions will forever remain in his memory. It is for this reason that he no longer wants to hear any confessions. His sister notices his drooping state and immediately starts pinching his cheek, wondering if her brother is again thinking about that bad girl she casually mentioned. Chris refuses and says that this cannot be. He is now only thinking about what they will have for dinner, but Molly still has doubts. The brother says that choosing dances to surpass her is too childish. His little sister is really too young. Molly blushes and tries to calmly say that it's not all about her. Doesn't his brother remember how he talked about his life's work? Chris at first cannot understand what she is talking about, but suddenly he remembers that at one time he mentored his sister when they were little. One day he was watching his favorite superhero series, and his sister came running to him demanding to play with her. But at the same time, Mom calls Molly to get ready for dance class. An interesting thought comes to little Chris's head. He tells his sister that dancing should become her life's work. Wanting to get rid of this little thing, and having remembered a couple of adult phrases, he forced her to go to the dance. But the young man can't even imagine that these words will become a motto for her in life, and she will begin to dance diligently. Molly begins to wonder if her brother has really forgotten about his instructions, and he doesn't care about his little sister at all. Chris laughs. Of course he hasn't forgotten. Those were his favorite words from the first episode of his favorite superhero show. Their conversation is interrupted by the roar of a car behind them. The bright headlights hit their eyes and a car passing next to them quickly rolls through a puddle. Molly wants to put herself forward to protect her brother from these splashes, but the elder does not allow her to do this, and on the contrary, exposes himself to the blow. Already at home, the girl blames her brother. She had an umbrella, and he turns straight towards all the splashes. She is unhappy that every time he tries to save everyone from unnecessary trouble. It's the same with dancing. Every time. Tired after his classes, he still goes to meet her. Molly admits that with all her heart she wants to take care of her brother, but instead gives him trouble. That's why she told Terry that she wants to quit dancing. Chris gently takes her face and says that when he became her brother, he immediately realized that he had to take care of her. He continues to pat Molly on the head, saying that she cannot quit dancing. Today she took fourth place, but she must definitely surpass that girl. The sister begins to yell at her brother for spending the whole day with the fox, and now using tricks. Chris laughs and says, "Wasn't she the one who declared that her life's work was to surpass her rival?" But Molly has already moved closer to him and offers to help him dry, since he is all wet. Chris tries to refuse, but his sister asks him not to say anything stupid and even throws him on the sofa. Molly starts tickling his stomach under his shirt, and coupons fly out of his pockets as he tries to get out of this torture. Seeing them, he remembers that he had completely forgotten about the appointment with Nanelle. He quickly gets ready and goes to the meeting place. Fortunately, there he finds the girl reading a book. She asks him from the doorway if he has solved the problem. Chris is in a stupor. How did she know that he would be delayed? To which Nanelle shows him the phone, where Melinda has already told everyone that he was kidnapped. The girl says that Miss Spring asked if she should call the police, but she stopped her. The young man understands that excessive concern also leads to excessive worry. And if he doesn't solve the problems now, there will be even more of them in the future. Nanelle finally wants to know what decision he made in response to her proposal. Early in the morning, while walking along the corridor, Chris stumbles upon Melinda waiting for him. He is shocked and wants to know what time she got up and why she came here so early. But the girl pretends that she doesn't understand what he's talking about. They just met by chance. And since they met, she needs to know what they did with Nanelle last evening, and when she found him, and also why he didn't pick up the phone. The hero would like to avoid this conversation and therefore simply replied that they discussed some matters with her and nothing more. The girl jumps back and starts rummaging through her bag, saying that yesterday she guessed everything herself, because Chris is so passive and this probably suits his hobbies. So she prepared this for him. Melinda takes out bondage and handcuffs from her bag. And then he decisively invites the young man to try all this. The hero has no idea where she learned all these things. Melinda takes out an erotic manual and says that she learned most of it from here, but figured out everything else herself. Unable to listen to all this anymore, much less participate in it, Chris runs away from there. But Melinda doesn't even think about leaving him alone and gives chase to him to see if he really doesn't want to try. Nanelle notices them catching up from the window. Chris tries to tell her that he is on duty today and needs to go urgently. He manages to break away from his pursuer, and she begins to scour the bushes in search of her lover. The young man hid in one of the classrooms and watched from the window as his search progressed. At this time, he receives a call from the chairman. She wants to know how her dear deputy spent the weekend. Chris says he had a great weekend thanks to her. That's what he said out loud. But in his head, he cursed her. Because of this fox, he'll be eating Molly's fried celery for a whole week. Tana is happy and asks her to solve one problem at the tennis club since he is in such a good mood, and promises to treat him to coffee later. But there was no answer to her proposal. The only thing she heard was that his phone was dead and how Chris was imitating beeps. This arrangement does not suit the chairman, and she instructs the Mandarin to check on Chris Brown in the class. A girl named Cleo Wei is the head of the student union's self-government department. With the nickname Mandarin, she happily agrees to fulfill the request. The young man no longer wants to interfere in someone's problems. And so on campus, dangers await him from all sides. And now someone came into the class and abruptly tried to take the sponge away from him. To his joy, it turned out to be Nanelle. she came to find out if Melinda was running after him this morning. Since they started cooperating with him last night, why not take advantage of their fake relationship today to correct this misunderstanding, the young man agrees. Seeing that Chris was very embarrassed, she decides to come closer to him. At the same second, Tana comes in with a mountain of books and starts talking about how long she's been waiting for the deputy, but after seeing this picture, her hands automatically dropped, letting go of everything. Then Melinda runs into the office, joyfully saying that she has come up with something new. Now the two of them watched as their lover kissed the queen of the school, Ninel. But everything turns out to be a little simpler. The girl approaching his face says that he has chalk in his hair. She even stands on her toes to look a little more. Chris perceives this as another test for him. Melinda cannot bear the first such heart wound. She cries and runs away. The chairman acts more restrained. She asks for forgiveness and, saying that she's had enough, also disappears behind the door. Having shaken the young man off the chalk, Ninel moves away and says that it seems she heard the voices of Melinda and Tana. Chris doesn't even know how he feels. It's probably all for the best. In the morning, he didn't know how to refuse the girl, and now he's randomly gotten rid of the burden that was on his soul. Ninel invites him to go with her to the literary club as they need to discuss something. Approaching the Ninel club, the guy called out, noticing Chris. He wants to ask him to leave since he needs to personally discuss the issues of the literary club with the girl. Ninel's gaze changed sharply. She began to look hopefully at her ally, giving him a signal. Chris shields her and, turning to the guy, says that since we are talking about the club, he should have nothing to hide. The young man is dissatisfied with who the deputy thinks he is. He accuses him of wanting to take advantage of his position in the student union to give them orders. The girl decides to take the initiative into her own hands and, turning to the young man, says that the deputy of the student union is also her boyfriend. The guys move on. These words cooled the young man's ardor so much that he even dropped all the papers from his hands. Entering the reading room, Chris suddenly sees Ninel bowing before him and asking for forgiveness. She apologizes for her willfulness. The hero tries to calm her down, saying that everything is fine and this was the only way to solve the problem. Next, Ninel decides to clarify the question of what couples usually do. She thinks that going to school and back together will not be enough to deceive everyone, so she invites him to join a literary club so that they can spend more time together. Chris immediately agrees on this. Besides, there is something else yesterday. When she was researching the relationship between couples, she came across a pink app in which lovers leave their mark and invites her to try it out. Chris is thinking about this too. He also doesn't mind doing all this for authenticity. Having clarified these questions, Ninel approaches him and asks him to bow his head again. She asks him not to move, and Chris's body seems to turn to stone, obeying her command as she kisses his neck. Now a scarlet kiss could be seen on the young man's neck from under his shirt. Ninel is pleased with her work, using bright lipstick. Now everything looks more realistic. Chris praises her for being so well prepared, and now he can rest easy. The girl sits down and says that today she still has some things to do, and starting tomorrow they will start going to school together. Already on the way back home, the main character began to analyze what he was thinking about. If he joins the literary club, he will become its deputy. As soon as the chairman finds out about this can be considered the date of his death sentence. He wanted to solve the problem, but as a result, he got into even more trouble. Is this really the typical life of a student? Even the way home was no exception for him, because out of nowhere, Melinda landed next to him and needed to talk to him. After picking up his drink order, Chris heads to the waiting girl, whose thoughts scream only about love. Approaching, he hands her a glass, and she abruptly snatches it out of her hands, offended. Melinda looks up at him and wants to know how long she and Ninel have been together. Chris, without hesitation, replies that they started dating yesterday. Now the girl understands what they discussed that evening. She decides to ask if she can call Ninel now and say that she and Mr. Brown are on a date. The young man simply replies that his girlfriend is a rather understanding person. Frowning, Melinda says that she likes him much more than his Ninel. Chris conveys that his girlfriend considers him a person who is worthy of her trust, and that is enough for him. Melinda admits that when they met a few years ago, she too immediately trusted him. Looking into the distance at the fading sunset, she says that in the future, Ninel will sit in her place and eat ice cream with him. Saying this, a lump comes to her throat and tears begin to flow from her eyes. She promises that she will definitely follow her lover. The ribbon on her hair has come undone and asks Chris to help her with this task, which is already familiar to him. As he ties a neat bow on her long pink hair, a thought occurs to him. Now he doesn't have to do this anymore. He clarifies whether he tied it well, and in response, the girl hums quietly. Could this be the last time they interact like this? Melinda quickly grabs his hand and starts crying bitterly, saying that obviously this is not their last date. She doesn't want to part with him. She starts pounding on Chris's chest, screaming that he should die. If she knew, she wouldn't have fallen in love with him. This explosion of emotions actually calms the main character. In fact, it is in the order of things. When she held back and silently shed tears, it was unbearably painful for him. The outburst of emotions calmed him down slightly. It was all over. As long as their fake relationship continued, this problem would solve itself. Returning home, he refuses ice cream, citing stomach pain, and continues to think that his story with Melinda will end, and then everything will fall into place. Memory remains in the past and life is expected in the future. For Miss Spring, he will become just a speck of dust, and that's enough. His sister decides to distract him from his lyrical thoughts by quietly sneaking into his room and throwing the blanket over him. Getting out of bed, Chris wants to know what she's doing here. Molly reminds him that he talked about the pain in his stomach. She wanted to cover him with a blanket, and if he was upset about something, then she could stay with him. He looks at his sister and his soul feels better from such a caring person next to him. Going out the next morning, he felt an eerie atmosphere in the air, and his premonition clearly did not let him down. Two guys stop him halfway and want to know if he is pestering Ninel, since according to rumors, the pervert Chris Brown grabbed her and forced her to do whatever he wanted. But they didn't scare the main character. He gives them the highest marks for acting and a transferable gum tattoo on his arm. They have a discipline test this month. The guys simply accept their revelation and are sincerely interested in whether he is dating Ninel. But as always, the hero of the so-called celebration appears on time and apologizes to Chris for being late. The pursuers, seeing this, fall to the ground and believe that their relationship is real, true. Ninel looks at Chris and wants to know if these people are causing him trouble. The young man refuses, but thanks her for her help. The girl is happy and, as a thank you for waiting, hands him a gift. She brewed tea with lemon for him. They continue to play pranks on the couple, and Chris also decides to take action and offers to help her carry her bag. But Ninel does not want to bother him. The young man quietly whispers to her that couples usually do this, and the girl agrees to his proposal. He happily takes her bag, but does not expect such weight and falls sharply down. Several books fell out of the backpack, and the hero wonders why she needs so many of them. Reading the serious titles of works, Chris thinks that only with the help of such a book can he fall asleep for a whole semester. And the thought also occurs to him that the girls from the literary club wear such bags to keep themselves in shape. Noticing the expression on the young man's face, Ninel wants to know if he thinks that literature is difficult to understand. Scratching his head, he's a little embarrassed to admit that for a techie like him, this really isn't easy. Touching his torso, she explains that literature has never looked down on life and has not been divorced from the masses. At any time, literature has reflected human life. People's experiences, feelings, and emotions are the source of both life itself and literature. In other words, she wants to say that literature is the science of man. Even artistic fiction is one of the possible manifestations of a person's life, and the expression of what is in his soul is his own literature. She understands that she has already bombarded the hero with abstruse words, and apologizing begins to stroke his head, and paraphrase that from the point of view of materialism, an expression of what is in his head. Chris removes her hand and awkwardly admits that even so, he didn't quite understand her. Deciding to make things easier for him, she asks, for example, if he thinks he likes Melinda Spring. He remembers that they have actually known her for a long time, and as a friend she is an interesting person and very cheerful. However, if we are talking about love, then this is the limit, so it is better for them to remain friends. Ninel invites him to express such feelings in a story that she will look forward to, but Chris doesn't even want to waste paper on such trifles. But their idyll is interrupted by the Mandarin shouting the name of the deputy, saying that the student union is about to fall apart, and he, you see, is on a date. She starts rushing towards him, saying that she wants to know what color his blood is. The girl is simply angry. Chris immediately takes off. The Mandarin's hand was about to grab the fugitive, when suddenly she received a click from Ninel. At this time in the office, Tana is experiencing her not the best state and looks at the same button from Chris's shirt. The young man nevertheless decided to follow the pursuer and find out why she was talking about the collapse of the student union. The Mandarin turns to him and asks if he thinks that the chairman did not find out about him and Ninel. He tells her about the situation that happened yesterday in class with Ninel. He saw Tanu, but she immediately ran away. Cleo looks him straight in the eyes and sarcastically declares that now he will go apologize to the chairman. Patting him on the head, she jokingly says that she will be his harakiri assistant, and then Tana may forgive him. Obeying and trailing behind the Mandarin, the young man does not understand why all this and what awaits him next. Cleo goes and mutters under her breath that one is stupid and the other is cowardly. The girl understands that she will not allow a bad outcome. She kicks down the door and literally pushes Chris forward. And then she sharply locks the door from the outside. The hero shouts for her to let him out. The Mandarin duck warns the boys that if they do not resolve anything between each other, she will not let them out, even if they die of hunger. Chris turns around and meets Tana's gaze. He hoped to avoid this meeting for as long as possible. The chairman is the first to decide to start a conversation, and she wants to find out if he decided to visit her himself, because this rarely happens. Seeing a pile of papers on the table, Chris wonders what the 38th parallel is, as the borders between South and North Korea are called. Tana tries to defend herself by saying that the filing cabinet was broken, so she had to put all the papers on the table. Taking the papers, the main character says that if she came up with the idea of lumping everything into one pile without checking the documents, then she must be just a professional in catching fish with her hands. The chairman decides to point out that he means that in his absence, she is slacking off. Chris wants her to confess if she is training him to be a wage slave in a company with a 12-hour work schedule. Tana calms him down and says that she wouldn't speak in such boring phrases. He wants to know why she is doing this to him. The girl points out that there is another reason for this. Turning it over on the table, she quietly says that she really likes him. These words take the young man by surprise. But he, with a straight face, says that he is forced to reject her proposal. While the hero is trying his best to restrain himself and remain calm, Tana says that she can't help herself. This is because the deputy really loves to eat fish, and if someone likes a person, then you like everything connected with him, so she constantly catches fish with her hands to please the deputy. Chris believes that this is not a reason for shirking work. These are all her typical fox tricks. The chairman says that looking at the deputy, she did not think that she would be right. The Mandarin duck turns to Tanya from behind the door, saying that it was precisely this behavior that led to today's situation. The chairman approaches the door, and the redhead, speaking, shouts that, in the whole world there is only one person left who does not yet know. Tana blushes and says that she doesn't know what to do if everything has already led to this result. The tangerine grabs her hand and explains that he doesn't know yet, but she's afraid to say it, and Cleo wants to volunteer to help now, because this needs to end. Miss Sinclair pushes her assistant outside to talk to her alone. Mandarin pets her on the head and wants to know how much longer she will play the old maid. The girl doesn't think that she wants this of her own free will. Tana asks if she thinks that she should take him away from someone else. The Mandarin is not against this. She can even provide support, but she does not think it is worth going that far. After talking a little more, the chairman returns to the office and orders to continue working and return to discussing financial reports. Chris turns and looks at her intently, wondering if she wanted to talk to him about work. And yet, he wants to know if everything is okay with her. Meanwhile, Tana listens to her friend's prompts from behind the door, who tells her to say that this is a woman's secret and he should not ask unnecessary questions. The tangerine unlocks the door and warns that she is going to go to the swimming club while they sort it out. Tana orders him to urgently get down to business and not waste time on empty chatter. After all, these association procurement applications expire in a week. If they are not approved today, then it is better to blow up the college before the leaders simply kill them. The chairman whispers something about how the Mandarin fish constantly catches fish with its hands, and this is already too much. Chris thinks that the same can be said about her. The girl decides to get down to work and review everything together with her deputy. It turns out that the swimming club wants to buy new equipment, and the tennis club also wants to change rackets, and the management agrees to this. The girl reads clearly with a hint and wants to know what the deputy thinks about subscribing to the magazine for the literary club. This makes Chris nervous, but he is all for signing this document. But Tana doesn't think so. Literature is an insignificant thing for their students. They need to study more in their specialty, and she decides to disband this club. Hearing this, Chris tries to stop her hand from signing this order. He asks her to treat all clubs equally seriously and taking the documents from her, says that now she will verify and he will approve. But Tana wants to entrust him with one task that requires the help of such a strict deputy. After all, only he can help them meet this Saturday. Chris understands that these are her fox tricks again. At the store, Molly tries to get her brother to try on pink swim trunks, but he refuses since he already has swimming trunks, and he only wore them once. Does he need another one? His sister insists that they are needed since those other swimming trunks are missing. He himself said that he has swimming as a physical education this semester, so he definitely needs them. Chris wants to know where they might have gone. He already put them in his bag last week. Rummaging through his bag, he stumbles upon the thermos that Nanelle gave him and realizes that if Molly sees this, she will kill him on the spot. The young man hides the bag behind his back and admits that it is better to buy new swimming trunks since the old ones are lost, but his sister already suspected something. She wants to look at the bag and make sure that he is definitely not hiding anything from her. The brother tries to get out of it and says that in his bags there is actually a super scary bug that looks like an octopus, and it seems that it is also predatory. And if she sees him at night, she definitely won't sleep. My sister says out loud that she believes him, but inside she understands that this is complete nonsense. And she still strives to see what her brother is hiding from her. But then, to her shame, Chris asks how she can know about the missing swimming trunks, and if his little sister did something bad behind his back. Her expression turns mischievous, and the demon in her awakens. She decides that if he really wants to know, then she will speak very loudly. The brother understands that this is all not good, and seeing the emotions on her face, he asks her to tell only without strange things. She admits that his swim trunks went missing last week, and she gets a little quiet and starts to blush. Molly continues the story. She put on a skirt, but could not find her shorts, and his swimming trunks conveniently fell into her hand. So she put them on without much hesitation. They were a little tight. Chris says that's enough, and he'll buy new swim trunks. And since they're here, would she like to buy herself a swimsuit? This becomes a revelation for Molly. Does her brother really want to watch her change clothes? Chris tries to make a joke of it all, saying that she thinks about things that children shouldn't think about, and he doesn't have such strange predilections. But she wants him to admit whether he has never thought about this. After all, it seems that her brother's just thinking about what he shouldn't think about. In his head, Chris has already called her a little imp. The girl carefully compares swimsuits and looks at the prices. The hero is afraid that the price tag will confuse her. But however, he remembers that Molly has been saving money for quite a long time, and she must have quite a large stash. He would even call her a little rich woman. He wants to find out from his sister how much she has already saved, but the answer doesn't suit him much. Molly mentions that it's still not enough. It's barely enough for the things she wants. She wonders if her brother wants to know why she is saving such a large sum, although she is not yet ready to talk about it. But her brother cuts her off, saying that he doesn't want to know, although in his thoughts he would really like to know. But no matter how close they must have their own secrets. Moreover, it may be the biggest secret associated with teenage romance or with legends about demons, as well as a secret power that can save the world. In any case, his sister cannot be ordinary. Molly looks at him with eyes full of love and thanks him for respecting her. Chris realizes that one thing he is sure of is that his sister is cute as hell. He invites her to pay for her new swimsuit with her own money, since she is saving hers. He takes one swimsuit from her hands, but immediately realizes that this swimsuit is too revealing. And even if he sits well on Molly, there will definitely be a person with bad intentions, and this cannot be allowed. He hands her another cheaper swimsuit, for which the girl calls him greedy, and retires to the fitting room. While waiting for Molly, someone's handbag suddenly lands in Chris's hands. The owner of the bag comes up to him and says that Melinda has not gone to school for 2 days, and today she has already gone to school for the 3rd day. They have already interviewed everyone in the college, and he just seems to know where she lives. Besides, the student union is obliged to serve the students, so he has to hand over all these notes to Melinda. This task was entrusted to him by someone from above, and refusals are not accepted. Chris only thinks about how tall his interlocutor is. The girl says goodbye to him and adds that he must deliver it by dinner and he must not be late. Molly comes out of the fitting room and wants her brother to evaluate her outfit, but notices that he is holding a black handbag. She immediately wants to know where it came from, whether a bad girl gave it to him, and if he doesn't give her a reasonable explanation, then let him not blame her for cruelty. Chris, running out of the store, manages to shout that he has urgent business, and he will explain everything to her. Standing in front of the mansion, he realizes that compared to his sister's pursuit and the cruel punishment that awaits him at home, handing over these notes to Melinda is the most troublesome task. Still, she did not go to school, probably because he broke off relations with her. Chris is trying to figure out how best to give them to him and what he should say when he meets her and tries to rehearse it. Only delusional ideas come into his head, which depress him. He goes through options, but cannot come to anything. He tries to express his embarrassment, but suddenly the sound of heels was heard behind him, and someone called out to him, saying that they had not seen each other for a long time. At the same time, Molly sends her brother a photo in a swimsuit and says that she has already prepared dinner for them. Chris, having received the photo and messages, cannot contain his embarrassment. The young man is seated at a table in the hall. Melinda's aunt named Chica met him. She sent the girl to the store and warns that she will return soon. Chica invites Chris to have dinner with them. He thanks her for the invitation, but says that he has things to do at home. The woman loudly places her mug on the table and declares that she needs to find out something from him. She heard that a few days ago, someone dared to reject her daughter, and now she wants to find out what happened. Chris's hands begin to shake, and he tries to pretend that he doesn't understand what she's talking about. Chica approaches the young man, and then he gives up and says that household chores will wait for him, and he can stay with them. The aunt changes her face, and putting on an apron, declares that he will soon appreciate her culinary skills. Chris realizes that he has already gotten himself into trouble. Finally, Melinda comes home from the store and shouts to her mother that she bought onions. Walking into the hall, she freezes when she sees Chris sitting on the sofa, who awkwardly greets her. She runs to her mother's kitchen, fearing that her brain has already begun to melt. Chica comes out at the cry of her child. Clinging to her mother, Melinda cries that she was hallucinating and saw the same one on their sofa. The mother decides to play along and confirm that her daughter's really out of her mind. She invents that the doctor gave her a certificate with a diagnosis and told her to report when her emotional state stabilizes. Melinda was scared and wants to know what to do now. Chica turns her and tells her to wait until the illness passes. But for now, go have fun with your hallucination in the room until she calls you for dinner. The girl and Chris walk into the room and sit down on the floor. Melinda greets him like he's a hallucination. The young man doesn't understand why the hell he's a hallucination. The main character decides to ask how she is feeling and say that her classmates gave her notes. But Melinda does not go out of character and still says, "What a cool hallucination she has." The young man begins to get scared that she really may be out of her mind due to her illness. He tries to hand her the notes, but she refuses, because if the girl touches him, the illusion will disappear. Therefore, until he disappears, she will not touch him. She loves Chris with all her heart, and she will not allow the wonderful illusion to disappear. Melinda gets out of bed and steps on the mysterious toy. And unnoticed by her, he tries to go further, but slips on her and flies back. She lands headfirst right on Chris's dignity, causing him hellish pain. Melinda suddenly turns over on her stomach and begins to beg Chris not to disappear. And only after a couple of seconds, it dawns on her that this is not a hallucination, but a real original. She flies out of the room screaming, afraid that he saw her without makeup, and in such clothes, the girl already thinks that she will never get married. Chica, coming out of the kitchen, says that since Chris left this mess, let him clean it up himself. The young man had already thought that his aunt could be a relative of Tana. She was as formidable as the white-haired fox. The main character understands that his problem has returned to its original state. Point: how can he get along with Melinda? Chris reaches the door to her room, knocks and asks if she is there. He caught an unfortunate moment when the girl decided to change clothes and, confused, she even shouted out that he was mistaken. The young man was about to go into the living room when he suddenly noticed a crimson stain, similar to blood, beginning to flow from under the door of the room. The most terrible thoughts creep into his head. He knocks down the door to the room and shouts that Melinda should not do this. But to his surprise, the girl sits peacefully on the bed, having managed to put on her pajamas at the last moment. Seeing Chris, she tries to hide and say that there is no Melinda here. She begins to talk about herself in the third person, mentioning that she has a normal temperature, and the doctor said that tomorrow she will be able to go to school. The young man also managed to find out what kind of red liquid was flowing out from under the door. It turned out to be just juice. He decides to point out this little misunderstanding to Melinda. The girl suddenly jumps out of bed and runs, flashing her piggy panties. Picking up the box from the floor, She opens it and breathes a sigh of relief. The cupcakes turned out to be in perfect order, not wrinkled and still fresh. The girl runs back to the bed. She places the box in front of Chris and invites him to try one of these delicious cupcakes. The hero takes a bite and says that it is very tasty, and he has never tried anything like this. Melinda proudly states that she is the one who baked these cupcakes, and in truth, she is a member of the student bakery club. Chris notes that she said that she is not Melinda, so is there really another honorary member in the club? The girl turns away embarrassedly and quietly says that it was Melinda who asked him to tell him this, because she is not here. Chris tells her that she needs to end this because they are already college students and maybe they won't play these childish games. Miss Spring reads lines from the song where it says that someone falls in love and someone goes to the sea at night. She says that Melinda also wanted to convey this. He listens as the girl continues to read the lyrics to him and gathering his strength asks her for forgiveness. Melinda says that he shouldn't apologize because these are just lines from a song. Now she is more interested in finding out how things are going with Ninel. Chris calmly says that everything is fine with her, but Melinda objects and says that this is not possible. After all, if he were her boyfriend, she would never have let him fall in love with another girl, especially when this girl confessed her feelings to him. Chris embarrassedly says that he was asked, so he came here. Melinda is happy that he finally changed the subject, and besides, she understands that she urgently needs to change her clothes. The young man wanted to start talking again, but turning around, he thought that Melinda was upset again, and turning away, was sitting and crying. What bothers him is that he hasn't even said anything yet, and she's already started crying harder. He puts his hand on her head and offers to talk to her face to face. He removes her pig cape and realizes that the girl was just changing under her. Melinda screams and orders him to close his eyes. In the end, the embarrassment between him and Miss Spring seemed to disappear thanks to the notes. Besides, Aunt Chica invited him to work in their store for the weekend, and he was forced to agree. This was, of course, a sign of another hassle, but he did not refuse them. Perhaps all this is due to fear. If you think about it, he still broke her daughter's heart a few days ago. On the other hand, he brazenly entered someone else's house, brazenly ate someone else's dinner, and brazenly took other people's things, so it was difficult to refuse. Thinking about all this, he suddenly stumbles upon Ninel on the street. She stroked a cute red cat, who liked her caress so much that he decided to crawl under her sweater. Chris wants to know why she's in no hurry to get home. She replies that while there was a break in the library, she wanted to finish the book and return. But the cat decided to interfere with her monologue when he saw Chris. And trying to jump out of the jacket, he involuntarily pulled Ninel towards the young man. The cat clearly enjoys the warmth between the two people, and she begins to purr loudly with pleasure. Chris helps pull the fluffy out from under his jacket and says that he doesn't have to play pranks. And Ninel suggests that he might be hungry. The tangerine is watching the couple from around the corner, hearing their conversation and trying to immediately report everything to Tanya. The observer noticed that they were now behaving rather strangely with restraint for a couple in love, although everything was conducive to this. She approaches the cat and thanks him for his good service today. This lump turns out to be a freelance student union member named Cookie. Chris finally made it home and just wants to lie quietly in his room. His sister reports that she is very late. Today, she and her classmates are going on a picnic, so she will stay at Terry's for the night. Molly declares that in her absence, he cannot dine on instant noodles and bring girls home. Hearing the front door slam shut, Chris even becomes sad. She left, and he was left all alone. But his sadness did not last long. He arranged a holiday of loneliness for himself, and to this is also added a holiday of video games. As he opens a can of chips and drinks a Coke, he hears the doorbell ring and thinks it must be Molly who forgot something. But the chairman appears behind the threshold, who greets him and hands him some kind of bag of food. Chris is not happy about uninvited guests and tries to close the door quickly. Tana starts bombarding him with questions about whether he's finished rechecking and asks if he forgot that someone has something important to do today. Chris is just ready to howl with despair and says that something has blinded his eyes and now he can't see anything. Tana asks him not to be a fool, but to let her in. The young man is against it because his sister forbade him to let girls in. The neighbor notices this strange struggle, and after greeting Chris, she makes the guys very embarrassed. The young man greets his aunt, and she notes how beautiful his girlfriend is. Chris laughs and tries to explain to her that she misunderstood, and this is not his girlfriend. These words clearly hurt Tanu, and at this time the aunt still does not believe the young man's words. Mr. Brown is already horrified that this fox is playing her act again. The neighbor promises him that she will not tell his parents about her. He pushes Tana into the apartment, shouting to the neighbor that they were just fooling around and won't bother her anymore. Slamming the door, he tries to catch his breath and recover from the stress, which the fox once again caused him. Tana, smiling, notices that she didn't say too much, but Chris shouts that she took control of her aunt with one scene. Sitting on a chair, she reports that she woke up early today to tell him about business and buy cookies, and still was condemned by him. As she puts the cookie in her mouth, she invites Chris to try it too. But the young man is ready. Maybe this is her trick to take a couple of ugly photos with him again. If she wanted to mock him, she was already an eternity too late. Tana moves closer and says that he should definitely try these very expensive cookies. The young man gives up and, having already gathered his courage, reaches out to bite off a piece of this delicacy. Chris tries to take a bite of the cookie, but Tana jumps away from him, leaving him with nothing. She did a trick with him and now wants the deputy to guess where the cookie went. Tana reaches out and pulls out the cookie from behind his ear, but doesn't calculate the load and leans a little on Chris, dropping the sweet from her hands. Being so close to each other, embarrassment takes over them, and an awkward silence hangs in the air between them.